Batman Beyond is not only one of the best Batman TV shows, but one of the best superhero shows period, and a more than worthy successor to Batman the Animated Series. But what were the cartoon's swayest episodes? With that said, I'm Ewan, this is What Culture Comics, and here are the 10 best Batman Beyond episodes. Number 10. Dead Man's Hand. The Royal Flush Gang were reimagined for Batman Beyond, and it was a change that effectively gave DC the definitive incarnation of those characters. The group appeared in 3 episodes over the course of Batman Beyond's 3 seasons, but it's still their debut episode, Dead Man's Hand, that's the clear highlight. Batman Beyond largely excelled because it didn't just do future updates for all of Batman's classic villains. Terry McGinnis got a new rogues gallery who went on to become iconic DC villains in their own right, even if they broach similar themes to older Batman stories. Case in point, Ten, who takes on a sort of Selena Kyle-esque role in Batman Beyond. She joins as a new classmate of Terry's at a time where he and Dana are having a bit of a rough patch, and the two hit it off, without either one realizing that they're exchanging blows as Batman and a member of the Royal Flush Gang respectively at night. It's a wonderful ep and a prime example of how Beyond was able to take the familiar and spin it in a new and exciting direction. Number 9. Meltdown. In this early episode, Batman gets his first real glimpse of Blight's true power, and Mr. Freeze makes his return. Blight crops up here a few times, and in any case, Freeze has the more compelling arc, so he's the one to focus on. As well as bringing such an iconic villain into the fold, it gives viewers an early glimpse at the differences between Terry and Bruce. Fresh-faced and a little naive, Terry takes Freeze at his word when he begins to show contrition for his previous actions. Bruce, more world-weary and wise, can't fully trust a man with Freeze's past. The truth is somewhere in between, with Victor starting his redemption before being double-crossed by Derek Powers and taking revenge. What this episode really nails though is that Freeze is a much nobler villain than most, and even with his deadly rampage, still finds a shred of humanity to sacrifice himself and save Batman. In addition to the self-contained Freeze arc, it set up Blight for some great stories down the road which make the cut later on. Number 8. Disappearing Ink. One of the new villains that made Batman Beyond's rogues gallery so great, Ink made a solid debut in Blackout, but really came into her own in Disappearing Ink, the same story that would give us one of the most nightmarish images in the DCAU. Side note, go watch our video on the darkest DCAU moments when you can, because hoo boy, Batman Beyond was like one big Cronenbergian body horror thing, and we love it. Disappearing Ink picks up with Ink now on ice, and at the mercy of a very creepy employee who ends up getting fired for being a massive creep. He comes back, breaks her out, and asks her to give him her powers. Ink eventually obliges, and the results, well, it's a cross between Senator Kelly's water form in the first X-Men and the fella in the first RoboCop who gets splooshed all over the windshield of that car. A bad time all around, I think we can all agree. Disappearing Ink is a perfect episode though, with the highlight of course being Bruce suiting up in his armor suit to rescue Terry. Number 7. Eyewitness. Eyewitness takes an excellent concept and runs with it through the episode. What if Batman committed a crime is the thread holding this one together when Commissioner Barbara Gordon witnesses Batman kill Mad Stan after a failed bomb plot. The episode begins with Batman accidentally ruining a sting operation and plays on the idea that Terry might be too much of a hothead to handle the cowl. There's mystery and intrigue as Bruce doesn't know who to believe at first, between Barbara's eyewitness account and Terry's protest of innocence. It doesn't take Bruce too long to side with Terry though, and the story quickly becomes about unraveling the mystery. Was there an imposter? An illusion? Is Terry lying? It all comes together to create one of Beyond's best eps. Number 6. Ascension. The episode where Batman discovers that Derek Powers, the man who killed his father, is also supervillain Blight, is possibly the best example of how different Bruce Wayne and Terry McGinnis were as the Dark Knight. When McGinnis hears that he may be responsible for Blight's condition because of an earlier attack, he's pleased to have gotten such sweet, delicious revenge on the man who wronged him. Bruce notices several times that Terry is too involved in this one, and eventually is proven right when Terry gets led into a trap by Powers' son. The intrigue here comes from the ever-changing dynamics. You have the standard Batman against bad guy thing, but there's also friction between Bruce Wayne and Terry on how they should handle everything. On top of that, you have Paxton Powers battling for his father's approval while also plotting to betray him, Paxton leading Batman on, and Derek himself against the more unhinged Blight persona. As Paxton tries to kill his father, Batman realizes that he could never break his code and kill, so ends up trying to save the man he despises. This one does the standard stuff well and adds some unique layers into the mix too. Number 5. Sneak Peek. Sneak Peek is an interesting episode as it tells its story more or less without a villain. We do find out that Peek murdered a scientist in the last 5 minutes of the show, but for the most part he's more of an annoying antagonist than an out-and-out baddie. Ian Peek is an investigative journalist, though he's mainly focused on celebrity scandal and gossip. In this episode though, he gets a much more serious scoop, finding a mob rat talking to the DA. He's able to get the footage he needs, but he sets off an alert on the way out and Batman is called. Following a scuffle, which Batman loses due to Peek's invisibility and phase-shifting powers, he bugs the Batmobile and manages to find out that not only Terry is Batman, but that the mantle was also held by Bruce Wayne. He threatens to reveal this information, but his body reacts poorly to overusing the powers, and he asks Bruce for help. It's great to see the old man back in action when they come to blows, and Peek's ultimate fate of sinking to the Earth's core is dark as hell, and also features perhaps the most stone-cold Batman one-liner ever. Number 4. The Call. The Call is the first two-parter here on this list and features Terry being invited to join the Justice League. The plot concerns a traitor in the ranks of the Justice League, with Superman recruiting Terry to investigate. Because Terry is an outsider, he couldn't possibly be the culprit, which adds some great friction between Batman and the rest of the League, which in itself has a really cool lineup. Batman discovers that Superman himself is the traitor as the first episode closes, but it's the second part that really piles the twists up high. Warhawk returns from the dead, Superman had been mind-controlled, and Bruce Wayne has been hoarding a sliver of kryptonite just in case. Bringing in the extra characters with their new fighting styles certainly makes for entertaining action sequences, and pitting them against each other as the mind-controlled creatures attack offers something different to the usual good versus bad dynamic. Number 3. Lost Soul. Lost Soul is a phenomenal episode for a whole host of reasons, but the main one is the villain. The episode revolves around an old tycoon from 30 years prior who uploaded his brain online, where he effectively lived as an AI to advise the board of his company. Only old Robert Vance is getting a bit loopy. I mean, being an AI will probably do that to you, and it isn't long until he decides to wreak havoc on Gotham and everything electronic. Your high-tech bat suit you need to fight crime with, well, it's in the hands of cyberpunk Elon Musk now, so things could really not get any worse. One of the big themes with Batman Beyond comes down to the idea of Batman itself. We've always known it's more than just the suit that maketh the man, and Terry decides to put that theory into practice, reaffirming himself as one of the best to ever don the mantle of the Caped Crusader. Number 2. Out of the Past. Batman Beyond was absolutely at its best when it was doing its own thing away from the older, more familiar Bat characters and stories, but as we saw with Meltdown, it also found major success in honouring the original characters' legacies. Out of the Past is one such example. Bruce is feeling his age and is frustrated he can't help people like he used to. Instead, Talia al Ghul, still as fresh as a daisy thanks to the miraculous qualities of the Lazarus Pit, with a proposition. Bathe in the pit with her and become young again, and merge the Al Ghul's resources with the Waynes to maximise their philanthropic efforts. Oh, there's also a Batman musical at the beginning which would take this episode into the top tier regardless of whatever else happened. Fortunately, the rest of the ep is also fantastic. Bruce takes Talia up on her offer and we get to see the character age down to their 50s. But then we get the bombshell reveal that it isn't Talia at all. It's Raish, and he's actually de-aging Bruce so that he can inhabit his body instead of his own daughter's. It's a wild episode, but it's grounded by a heavy emphasis on Bruce's state of mind now that he's much older. And number 1, Rebirth. Rebirth is the second two-parter on this list, but it's actually the first Batman Beyond episode ever aired. It opens with Bruce Wayne's last night as Batman, where we see him older and weaker. He picks up a gun to defend himself, and while he doesn't use it, it's enough to get him to retire from vigilantism for good. Origin stories aren't always great, but after a tragically melancholic opening, the rest of the story is told at breakneck speed. An Akira-inspired motorcycle chase leads Terry to Wayne Manor, where we get to see Old Man Bruce fight off a gang of Jokers, who take their name from Batman's most notorious adversary. It's so crammed with action as well, as Terry discovers Bruce as Batman, finds out his father was killed by Derek Powers, and that Powers himself has been illegally experimenting with chemicals before Terry steals the Batsuit. The fact Bruce is initially angry that Terry has taken up the cowl and even tries to sabotage him immediately afterwards marks their relationship as being far different from the traditional Batman-Robin pairing. It ends with Terry being directly responsible for the series' overarching villain, Blight. Not only does it introduce characters and dynamics perfectly, it sets up complex arcs to pay off later on as well. And those were the 10 best Batman Beyond episodes. I know I personally missed a bunch of my favorites off here, like Earth Mover and Heroes, so let me know what your favorite eps are down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, it would be shway if you could give it a like, and if you want to see more of this sort of thing, then be sure to subscribe to Wild Culture Comics too. That's all for now though, take care, and I will see you soon. Bye!